Hi folks, my name is Greg Baise. I'm President and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association. I have had the privilege of watching a lot of last session days over my career in Illinois, both in days of state government and also with the IMA for nearly 25 years. Today ends what I think to be one of the most unfriendly business to business from an Illinois General Assembly that I've seen in all the years that I've worked here. My Democrat friends like to say that we are in a race to the bottom. Unfortunately, I am here to tell you that we are winning that race. And that means that Illinois businesses and Illinois families are losing. The high cost of business activities such as workers' compensation is one of the biggest issues that face my membership. And the activity that has gone on in that particular issue will not make it a better place for Illinois businesses to operate if the legislation that has been proposed gets through the General Assembly. We have not seen any kind of action on a balanced budget in trying to get Illinois back on a firm fiscal standing. We have not seen any work that has progressed in improving the workforce, allowing for educational activities to retrain our workforce for the jobs of the future. Instead, we have seen inaction, continuing battles between the factions in this General Assembly, and Illinois businesses are really sick and tired of what they're seeing going on. I'm here with my business colleagues today, and we felt it important in the last hours of the Assembly as it moves toward the May 31st deadline to highlight many of the activities that have gone on. And there is in the press release a litany of bills that have been either talked about, proposed, or passed that makes it clear that Illinois is sending a message to businesses not only here in Illinois, but across the nation, that this state is not interested in improving the business climate of this state. And unfortunately, we continue to see Illinois close one day at a time. I'd like to call upon my good friend Rob Carr, the Illinois Retail Merchants, first to look at some of the issues facing the retailers.
Thank you, Greg. Rob Carr, Illinois Retail Merchants Association President. As Greg noted, it's hard to get your mind around exactly what direction Illinois wants to go. As we look at the national headlines and frankly the state headlines in terms of the retail industry, most of you notice and carried in your papers, on your radio and TV broadcasts, every week, stores closing, retail of all types and sizes announcing that they are closing. The unfortunate effect for them is all they hear right now out of Springfield is the narrative, much like the actions they have seen out of the city of Chicago and Cook County, which is to reach into our pockets with both hands. People want people to earn more, they want people to make more, they want to add additional costly benefits, they want to dictate the way we can schedule and what we can price. And the problem is that the math that no one can answer is, with all of these costs that are being piled on, both with mandates and with tax increases, either proposed or enacted, how they expect anyone to be able to afford anything, how they expect to be able to develop in neighborhoods that are currently underdeveloped, let alone sustain in business sectors that have ample or thriving development. So it is a bleak narrative when you are in the retail sector. You're operating on an extraordinarily small and narrow profit margin, and you're seeing that simply vanish at the fiat of government action. So with that, I'd like to turn over to my friend Todd Meisch, President of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. Todd?
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. I'm Todd Meisch, Illinois Chamber of Commerce President and CEO. And I will tell you that the Chamber has been consistent since really this whole deadlock began, in that we believe that the very first thing the General Assembly needs to do to get us out from under this endless cycle of taxation, spending more, taxation, is you've got to grow the economy. And part of that is, of course, to go ahead and have pro-business, pro-growth policies, and I'd like to talk about some of those. But also the counter to that is that you can't undo anything that is positive by doing harm to employers. And that's unfortunately what we've seen this session. Number of issues, whether it be a massive tax increase, $5.4 billion coming out of the Senate, under consideration in the House, evidently. But on the other side, a workers' compensation reform bill that is supposedly is supposed to help employers, but really is fake and phony workers' compensation reform. That's the kind of thing that gets employers it just doesn't hurt the bottom line. It makes them mad. It makes them angry. It makes them want to invest in other places other than Illinois. For instance, House Bill 160 passed the House just today. There are some things in there that may be positive. So employers, or the people who voted for that bill, are going to want to talk about some of the things that were positive. But they're going to completely ignore the fact that on whole, the net is definitely in favor in opposition to employers and is going to increase their costs. So House Bill 160, again, the gap between what it's advertised as and what it really is a huge, huge problem. Another bill that's along those lines is Senate Bill 1502, the so-called Right to Know Act. Sounds great, but the real problem is that it impacts businesses from Facebook all the way down to a car dealer, and increases their costs, increases their exposure to liability, and it's a terrible piece of legislation. Again, the gap between what's advertised, what it really is really detrimental to employers and our reputation going forward. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Reaver, Vice President of Government Affairs with the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce.
Michael Reaver, Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce has a unique perspective, especially on what's going on in Springfield today. For the past 2 years, our members in the business community in Chicagoland have experienced well over $2 billion in direct and indirect taxes, fees, and property tax hikes. There's a complete unawareness down here in Springfield of the inaction that's going on here and how it impacts our members in the business community in Chicagoland. Not only is there inaction related to a state budget which does not provide the stability and certainty that businesses need to thrive and grow, but the problem with some of our colleagues or some of the General Assembly members is that a lot of them are targeting and attacking businesses with a lot of the legislation that we're talking about here today, but at the same time they want economic development and jobs for their constituents. And those are two pretty mutually exclusive ideas. Specifically, one example, as Todd mentioned, was the so-called Right to Know and the geolocation bills. Two bills designed basically to allow plaintiffs' attorneys and trial lawyers to sue businesses outright, with no regard or actual, investment in protecting people's privacy or consumer data. That was a huge concern for us. We've spent the last several months, along with the coalition, including the Illinois Chamber and my fellow colleagues here, fighting that legislation when we could be working towards growing the economy and doing good policy and legislation that will allow businesses in Illinois and in Chicagoland to thrive. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark Grant, State Director of NFIB.
Thank you very much. As he said, I'm the State Director of NFIB. We're a small business organization. We represent over 11,000 small businesses here in Illinois, and it's kind of hard to follow up all this because you can hear what's been going on over here, but let me just talk a little bit about what our members think. They aren't surprised by what's happening with the legislature and the annex that have been pulled over here, but they are very disappointed. They were hoping that this year there might be something a little bit different, something that might help small businesses grow and thrive. But that's not the case. Instead, we're getting a litany of all these bills that make it much more difficult for a small business to grow, to employ people, and to prosper. They want legislators who are focused on not scoring political points, but actually enacting good policies that benefit all of Illinoisans, working families, as well as small businesses. The list is very long of the small business bills, or the bills that have affected small business. And I just stand with my fellow business folks here in opposition to what's been happening. Thank you.
Questions for the group?
You talked about the tax credit bill, the 160. What are some of the good parts and some of the bad parts?
Sure. The 160 originally we had some high hopes for. There were some bad things in there we identified right away, but there was enough positive items that we said, you know what, we'd like to have a conversation with the sponsor, Representative Zalewski, and see if we can go ahead and turn this something in that's a net positive for employers. So along the signs that we've got to say are positives, and I wrote down here real quick, state tax is certainly good for the agriculture community. Our coal and aggregate producers had some tax credits they wanted to get in there that are in there as well. The shipping sales tax, kind of a half measure that helps retailers that have been sued by law firms, very similar to the Right to Know Act we've got a problem with. So those are a few of the positive things. On the downside, though, is there's this Keep Illinois Business Act, which says that anybody who takes an economic development incentive but has to move jobs to other states for whatever reasons, has to give back all their incentives. Nobody's going to take those incentives because no one knows whether they can move one employee out of state or not. That's a real killer. Research and development tax credit, MPC are not in there. Those are obvious things that need to be extended. They're not in there. A $5,000 tax on all corporations, really a gross receipts tax. That's very problematic as well. So 160, we know Representative Zalewski gets this stuff. It's kind of really a political document, we think, but unfortunately it sends a bad political signal to the people that we want to create jobs in Illinois.
Could you guys talk more about Senate Bill 81, the minimum wage hike? Do you guys believe maybe minimum wage is too high how it already is? Like, I know you guys are opposed to raising it to $15 an hour. Can you just speak more to that?
I think the opposition is simple. It proposes increasing the second largest or the largest cost in the retail community of their line item, 81.8% in 5 years. I think if you break this down to consumers, for example, what if their rent or their mortgage increased 81.8% over the next 5 years? Who could continue to afford their apartment or their home in the next 5 years? I dare say almost no one would be able to do that. We've addressed this from the math doesn't work. It's surprising, but union contracts for starting grocery clerks in the city of Chicago started at $8.43 last time I checked. Those are negotiated contracts subject to the laws of economics, right? So clearly that math doesn't work for them. They like to target large corporations and suggest, well, if you didn't pay the CEO as much, so we practice zeroing out CEO money. If you zeroed out the CEO of McDonald's, a person gets an extra $4.16 a year. So clearly the math doesn't work for the market. And I think when you break it down for the consumer, it sheds new light on it.
Can we talk about the budget situation? The Senate passed the budget last week. The governor has said that he won't sign that unless there's a property tax freeze. Do you all agree with that position?
We have agreed that there have to be reforms. If you're going to ask the people of Illinois to ask them to increase the taxes, which are necessary to balance the budget, there has to be reforms that go along with that. I think the governor's been very reasonable in his request. The property tax freeze, folks in Cook County are getting their assessments right now. Heard from a member this morning, 31% on their home that the assessment went up, expecting the increase to be similar on his business. So if you're going to be asking for increased corporate and personal taxes, looking at the taxes on the property is something that is really necessary. He also asked for workers' compensation reform. A lot of discussions went on in the Senate about that. We were very close to having not everything that we wanted, but over years, and those who have watched work comp reforms over the years, you don't always get everything that you would like, but it would have been an incremental improvement taken off the table at the last minute. House passes a bill, or the Senate passes with a state insurance fund and some, as Todd said, fake workers' comp reform in it that will not move the ball forward. So those are items that if you're going to ask on the one hand for the citizens of Illinois to pay more, there should be a change in the direction and trajectory of this state. And unfortunately, the Democratic-controlled General Assembly has not agreed to that.
Do you, as a collective group, agree with, however, the civic committee of the commercial club that, yes, reforms are great long-term, they talk about property taxes, they talk about workers' compensation, but you guys all want certainty, you want stability. It's been 2 years, now we're approaching 3 without any sort of budget. I mean, isn't that more destabilizing than workers' compensation or anything else?
Well, should the Democrats also, should there be a spirit of compromise moving to the middle? Democrats have refused to go against their patrons in the trial bar and organized labor on reforms for workers' compensation, as an example. Is it too much for them to try to meet in the middle? The Civic Committee's report points out what is the obvious to a lot of people. But the reality of it is, unless you make changes in making Illinois a more attractive place to do business, you're not going to change the direct trajectory, as I say, and you'll have just this continuation of the same thing that we've had over and over. we have anybody else wants to speak to it.
I think one other quick component is you know, budget does bring stability and certainty, but as we've continued to advocate to policymakers throughout, we need restraint. You're not going to get stability in Illinois if there's no restraint. And one of the biggest, most significant, in our opinion, when you talk about the retailers on Main Street, is the restraint that needs to come to local government, particularly as we look towards the city of Chicago and their actions. They stand to benefit significantly from any budgetary action that takes place in Springfield. And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect them to start to have some, to live within their means and to stop piling and reaching into employers' pockets with both hands, as has been their practice to date. Without that restraint, we're just back at this game again in a few years.
What have Democrats said when you voiced your opposition to things like House Bill 160, their workers' compensation reform, that they argue on the floor, this is supposed to help business, this is good for business, and yet you're all here? Is this Democrats for show? Is it deaf ears? Is it just a different
So let's use
perception in
one,
different
let's
groups
use
of
one of their
businesses?
examples, the state fund, that they want to blame the insurance industry. And actually, all of us, we may have insurance company members, but we're not here to represent that particular industry. We have competition in the insurance arena. We believe in workers' compensation. So they passed a state fund. That's going to take anywhere, estimates of $50, $100, $200 million to capitalize a state fund to be able to compete in the marketplace where there are already 300 companies writing workers' compensation in this state. Do we think that's a real reform that is going to offer a downward pressure on price on workers' comp costs in this state? No. So when they want to talk about that reform, it's really an obfuscation. It's a misdirection of what the real problem is in our work comp costs. And they really don't want to work on changing that because you have tremendous opposition from the trial bar, organized labor, medical community on all of the things that go into workers' compensation. And frankly, a General Assembly without strong leadership internally will not take on those challenges.
Can you address, and it came in late, so I don't know if you did already, but they extended at least a House bill to extend the EDGE credit, but they didn't include research and development, they didn't include manufacturers purchasing credit.
Right. Todd
or
talked
graphic
to that.
design.
Yeah, we did talk to 160, and there are real problems with it. There are a few things in there that are okay. And that's, I'm sure, what the Democrats will go ahead and play up. Problem is, they're not going to talk about the things that are really detrimental to the business community and obvious things that should happen that have not. Research and development, MPC, probably at the top of that list. Graphic arts could be in there as well. But $5,000 new gross receipts tax to all sorts of corporations. Some of the other things that are in there, it definitely is a net negative for employers. Unfortunately, again, just another kind of boondoggle, I think, to check a political box that says we did something on tax reform when in reality it made things worse on whole.
And Greg, can you address the research and development credit? Why is that so important to manufacturers?
Well, look at the companies we have in this state. Major companies are lifeblood, is R&D, to be able to be planning for the future. And we are now going on, year 3 without it, that tax credit. We have a pharmaceutical industry in this state that on average pays over $100,000 per job. Shouldn't we be encouraging that particular part of our economic sector to grow? This is a discouraging point to them in not having that kind of tax credits. So it's sort of mind-boggling that a General Assembly wouldn't understand that and whether it's Republican or Democrat, these are about good middle-class jobs. We talk about all the time the disappearing middle class in Illinois, in this country. And one of the reasons that's occurring is the fact that good middle-class jobs, whether they be in the retail sector, service sector, or manufacturing sector, we're not growing in this state. We've lost 100,000 net jobs since 2000 across all sectors in Illinois, while we've grown 400,000 in population. So the things that the trend is wrong in being able to increase the number of jobs that people want to stay here. And you all hear it yourselves. People are looking for opportunities to go elsewhere and not stay in this state.
Greg and others, given that we had this weak economy for so long and the job loss you mentioned, what accounts for basically you guys losing the political fight when you walk the halls and talk to the lawmakers? Why are you not getting more cooperation? It would seem in this environment people would finally say, we got to do something for the business community.
It would seem so, wouldn't it? You would think that it would not be this hard. The numbers show it. And as Chicago has lost more population than any other major city in the country. This state's growth has been stagnant. as states around us. You've heard me talk, Terry, time and time again, just about the manufacturing sector, that Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, all have increased since the recession of '09. Significant numbers in their manufacturing sector. Illinois, totally flat. So somebody's got to wake up one of these days and say, what are we doing wrong here? And I think Rob hit upon it, because you've got local governments that continue to put pressure on their taxpayers locally, statewide. The unfortunate part of this fight that we have seen for the last 2.5 years in this state is the fact that we cannot come together over a common sense approach to improving this economy. Bruce Rauner may have asked for things that he could never have accomplished with the political reality of the third floor in this building, but I would say that portions of the third floor in the Democratic Party haven't moved to try to compromise with him in moving forward on some of the business reforms and other economic reforms necessary.
Do you think that politics, the political climate might have something to do with that, particularly the fact that the campaign never ended? There was never a period of time in this building where people were just governing. It's been a continuous campaign from the beginning.
Yes. I mean, I don't mean to be snippy about that, but yes, politics, and I said today earlier when asked, I believe that the politics of 18 have already invaded into the legislative actions of 17. You're already seeing that. I think that the actions that are being played out on both sides already that are playing out what the 18 race is going to be about makes it more difficult to
Have you
solve these problems.
articulated that to the principals on both sides and urged them maybe to
Well, we really
change
haven't
their-
asked my opinion of that. I don't know if the others have had those conversations.
So, given that, I mean, next spring is gonna be even more difficult. What, do you have a game plan for the summer and the spring to keep businesses in Illinois? You know, if there's no legislative solution. what are
Well,
the
I think all of us here represent various sectors of the business community. All of us are on the road talking to our members, to news media outlets. I made 25 speeches this spring about the manufacturing situation in this state. The theme of it, Illinois is closing one day at a time. The fact that we're not keeping up with manufacturing jobs at our neighboring states. These gentlemen make the same kind of statements about other kind of industries. We've just got to keep really shouting from the rooftops that there has got to be a change here. And frankly, you don't see the legislators, I guess, have the kind of feeling that, well, we better do this now, or what will we do next year? There just doesn't seem to be the sense of urgency, and that's very disappointing.
And we'll be embarking on similar tours throughout the summer to educate lawmakers, and I think to reach out to non-traditional allies as well. One of the themes that we have come upon the last couple of months is reaching out to local governments. Mayors have got to become aware, and frankly, city councils have got to become more willing to engage in this debate, because for the retail sector anyway, we are typically their largest revenue generator. And without us, without a healthy Main Street, they're going to have a really hard time continuing to deliver the services they think they want to deliver to their citizens.
What are you hearing from your colleagues from similar associations in neighboring states? What's their viewpoint of Illinois? Are they patting you guys on the back saying, hey, keep, because they're getting more businesses? What's that conversation like? You guys have those talks?
Well, yeah, I do, and I'm sure everybody here does. I mean, they can't believe it. They scratch their head. Is it really that bad? I mean, you see the quotes that, we don't want to be Illinois. I mean, we are the laughingstock of the nation. No budget. Largest unfunded pension debt of any state in the country. The idea that we've not been able to move forward on economic reforms. No. I mean, when I started in this business, if you would have told me 20 years ago that the state of Indiana would be putting up billboards encouraging people to come to Indiana, you'd have laughed at it. Really, Indiana? But that's what's happening. I have a board chairman who needs to expand his steel operation in Bedford Park. He is looking at increased property taxes. He look at the fact that the pension debt in this state continues to spiral out of control. The idea for him, and he's got 5 facilities around the country, for him to pick Illinois, the Bedford Park facility, as the one to expand is most likely not going to occur. And he is a participant and active in the civic business of associations and doing things. So what do you think corporate leadership who might be sitting in Germany, New Jersey, Texas thinks when they look at Illinois and they make a decision? Are we going to go to that state? I mean, the answer is easy to make.
Todd, you've said, you brought up a story about a company that was looking at Houston and Chicago to move their offices. and they chose Chicago because their employees liked the parks, the museums, the schools, the public transportation, the services, and that's why they decided to move there. And it was not over workers' compensation, it was not over these business reforms. So, you know, does going another 2 years or however long it is until there's no budget, you know, isn't that a problem with wooing business to the state?
Yeah, it is a hurdle. There's no doubt about it. And again, I can't speak for any one company, but did share in general terms. Actually, Michael might want to take this one as well. Because let's face it, there are some companies that have been moving to Chicago in particular for their corporate headquarters. And that's great. We're very happy to have them. But we believe that's very much in spite of our problems. And I think that the curve is just getting steeper and steeper and steeper the longer this problem goes on. And what you really get within this inaction, going back to an earlier discussion about where the Democrats, can they come in the middle? Their refusal to move at all sends a very, very strong signal to the rest of the business community that without Governor Rauner here, we'd be likely to be passing a lot of these things that I think the governor is going to go ahead and veto. They could become the law of the land in 2 years. And that is going to, the fact that they're unwilling to act now on any kind of compromise, I believe sends a strong signal that they believe post 2018 that we're going to only accelerate the downward path, and that's going to be a real problem. But I don't know if Michael wants to talk particularly about Chicago.
Yeah, to your question, I think first off, it's worth noting that one size doesn't fit all. So for whatever reason one business comes to Chicago, there's completely different reasons why another or others may come to Chicago. In addition, that's not, especially in our conversations with aldermen, Cook County commissioners, that's not necessarily the type of economic development that they're looking for. So when we're shooting ourselves in the foot, for example, with the right to know, so-called right to know, or the geolocation bills, we're attacking and going after one of the strongest and most thriving and growing industries in Chicago, the tech industry, right? I mean, it impacted all businesses, but specifically it was going after tech. So when we're having the inaction that we have in Springfield, and then the inaction is possibly going to impact what Chicago does later to fill the budget gap at CPS, or some of the fiscal challenges that they have because of inaction down here, that's also a huge concern for our members and in Chicagoland, because take, for example, all the corporate headquarters have come to Chicago, right? So the inaction down here in Springfield, that may force Chicago to relook at a head tax that was just dissolved, 4 or 5 years ago by Mayor Emanuel. So there's I think there's an incomplete conversation that's going on here in Springfield, and part of our job, Chicagoland Chamber, is to remind these legislators across Illinois what we've already done in Chicago. And again, $2 billion in indirect taxes and fees. If we're talking about filling a budget gap with, for example, just for argument's sake, sweetened beverage tax, well, Cook County already passed that. And so now you're going to double down on a horrible tax that's unnecessary, that kills a lot of union jobs. That's a problem, and that's the picture and incomplete conversation that we're having down here in Springfield. And that's a concern, because the inaction and then whatever may come out, to Todd's point, that are being passed right now is going to have an impact on our members, and that cumulative impact is incredibly negative, and it only depresses especially the areas that need the economic development the most.
Okay, folks, anything else?
Well,
Thank you all.
What's,
One more.
what's the message that you're putting out to your members? I mean, we hear all the bad bills that are going forward, and if the governor's not there, then they can become law, if he doesn't veto them, and so on and so forth. But what's the message you are trying to give to your members, especially after today's failure?
The message is this was a very unfriendly General Assembly to business. It's got to change, or we're going to continue to see the downward spiral. We don't have to convince our members of that story. The general population needs to hear that story. Okay, thanks.
No, we're good. All right, thank you. Thanks for pulling together.